The winter storm arrived much earlier than anyone expected. By late afternoon, thick, gray clouds covered the sky, and the wind began to move across the Arizona highlands like a giant cold wave. Caleb Turner stood on the front porch of his ranch house, watching the sky with a worried look. He had lived on this land his whole life, and knew when a normal storm was coming, and when something worse was on the way. This one felt worse. The cold air pushed against the old wooden house, making it creak softly. Caleb wrapped his coat tighter around himself and went to check on the animals before the weather became too strong. The ranch stretched across many acres of dry land, open fields, and long dirt roads that curved around the hills. In the winter, the place became quiet, almost lonely, but Caleb was used to it. After his father passed away, he continued to run the ranch alone, working from sunrise until dark most days. It was a simple life, but it was the only life he knew. As Caleb walked toward the stables, snowflakes began to fall slow at first, then faster, until the air looked full of white dust floating everywhere. He finished checking the horses, closed the barn door tightly, and started toward the house again. The wind grew stronger, almost pushing him sideways. He lowered his head and walked carefully, feeling the storm worsen by the minute. Just as he reached the front gate, something caught his eye. For a moment, he thought it was his imagination, perhaps a trick of the falling snow, or maybe a branch moving in the wind. But then he saw it again, a small, shaky movement near the fence line at the far corner of his land. Caleb stopped walking. The snow made it difficult to see far, but he could make out a faint shape. It looked like a person, or maybe an animal. His first thought was that someone's horse might have wandered off, or maybe a neighbor was stuck in the storm. His second thought was that no one should be outside in weather like this, not unless something had gone very wrong. Without wasting time, he hurried back to the house, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and returned outside. The cold wind hit his face so hard it almost burned. He pulled his hat down low and walked toward the fence line, shining the light ahead of him. As he got closer, he realized the shape was a person, someone crouched on the ground, leaning weakly against a wooden fence post. Caleb moved faster, his boots sinking into the growing layer of snow. When he reached the person, he saw a woman wrapped in a thin, worn coat that looked far too light for the cold. She lifted her head slowly when he reached her. Her lips trembled, and her voice came out thin and broken, as she whispered, "I'm freezing. I need to get warm." Caleb felt a jolt of alarm. The woman looked barely conscious. Her dark hair was tangled with snow, her hands were shaking uncontrollably, and her skin looked pale with cold. She was an Apache woman, he could see that clearly from her features, but he had no idea where she had come from or how she ended up here. He crouched down beside her. "Ma'am, can you stand? You're freezing. Let me help you." She tried to move, but her body didn't respond. Caleb realized she was dangerously close to hypothermia. If he wasted even a few minutes, she might lose consciousness completely. Carefully, he slipped one arm under her knees and another behind her back, lifting her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless from weakness. As he carried her toward the house, she whispered something again, but the wind swallowed her words. When Caleb reached the porch, he kicked off the heavy snow from his boots and pushed open the front door. The warm air inside hit them both, but the woman didn't react. He laid her gently on the sofa near the fireplace, then hurried to throw more logs onto the fire until the flames grew brighter and stronger. He removed the wet, snow-covered coat from her shoulders and wrapped her in 2 thick blankets. She shivered under them, her teeth chattering softly. Caleb rushed to the kitchen, heated a pot of water, and filled a cup with warm, not hot tea. He returned to the living room and held the cup near her lips. "Try to drink a little," he said quietly. "It will help." Her eyes opened slowly. She took a tiny sip, then another. Even those small movements looked painful. But he could see a faint spark of life returning to her. The storm outside grew even stronger, pounding against the windows, but inside the room the firelight spread across the walls, giving a sense of safety and warmth. Caleb sat down in a wooden chair near her, watching carefully to make sure she didn't fall asleep. When someone was that cold, sleep could be dangerous. He kept speaking to her gently, telling her she was safe, and that the storm would pass. After a few minutes, she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was so soft, he almost didn't hear it. "What happened?" he asked, his tone kind but concerned. "How did you end up out there?" She opened her mouth as if to answer, but her eyelids drooped again. Her body seemed caught between wanting to rest and fighting to stay awake. Caleb didn't push her. He knew she needed warmth more than conversation. After another hour, her trembling finally began to ease. Caleb went to check outside again. The snow was falling heavily, and the wind was howling so loudly it felt like a crying voice echoing across the land. There was no chance of calling for help tonight. The storm had knocked out phone signals many times in the past, and tonight was no different. The nearest town was miles away, and no vehicle could travel in this weather. When he returned to the living room, the woman's eyes were open again. She looked around the room slowly, as if trying to understand where she was. "You're in my home," Caleb explained gently. "I found you near the fence. You were freezing. You're safe now." She nodded weakly. "My name is Nayeli." Even speaking her name seemed to take effort. Caleb smiled softly. "I'm Caleb. You can rest here until the storm stops. I'll stay awake and keep the fire going." Nayeli closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeper now that her body was warming. Her hands were still cold, so Caleb handed her another blanket. She accepted it silently, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Hours passed slowly. Caleb kept adding wood to the fire. Sometimes he walked around to keep himself alert. Other times he sat near the sofa, making sure Nayeli didn't slip into a dangerous sleep. The storm outside felt endless, and the whole world seemed reduced to the small circle of warmth inside the room. In the early hours of the night, Nayeli began to speak more clearly. She didn't give many details, only small pieces of what had happened. Her truck had broken down somewhere far from the main road. She had tried walking, thinking she would find help sooner. But the storm grew quickly, and she became lost between the hills. She whispered that she hadn't expected the cold to be this strong. Her voice trembled as she remembered the fear she felt when the wind became too strong, and she could no longer tell which direction she was going. Caleb listened quietly. He didn't ask too many questions. He could see she was still weak, and pushing her to explain more would only tire her further. Instead, he kept repeating gentle words of comfort, telling her she was safe now, and that she didn't need to worry about anything tonight. At one point, Nayeli whispered, "I thought I wouldn't make it." "You made it," Caleb answered softly. "That's what matters." She looked at him with tired but sincere eyes, and in that moment, Caleb felt something shift inside him. A quiet sense of responsibility. Not forced, but natural. He didn't know who she was or where she came from, but he knew he had to protect her, at least until she recovered. By the time the clock reached midnight, the fire was strong, and Nayeli was breathing steadily. The color in her skin was slowly returning. Caleb leaned back in his chair, watching the flames dance. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the small ranch house, a small bubble of warmth and safety held firm against the cold world beyond. And there, in the quiet glow of the fire, their story truly began. Two strangers brought together by the harsh winter night, each unaware of how deeply this moment would shape both their lives in the days ahead. Morning came slowly, as if the storm itself did not want to let go of the night. The sky outside remained heavy with clouds, and the wind still whispered around the house. But the fierce howling had softened. Inside the ranch house, the fire had burned low, but it still gave off warm orange light. Caleb had stayed awake most of the night, only allowing himself short moments of rest while sitting upright in the wooden chair beside the sofa. When the first faint light entered through the small window, he noticed Nayeli stirring. Her breathing was steadier now, and her eyes opened more clearly than before. She looked around with a sense of awareness she didn't have the night before. Caleb stood up slowly and walked toward her. "You made it through the night," he said gently. "How are you feeling now?" Nayeli swallowed softly. "Better, much better, thank you." Her voice was still weak, but it no longer trembled from cold. Caleb handed her a cup of warm tea he had prepared earlier. She sat up slowly, holding the cup between her hands. The heat seemed to comfort her instantly. She took a few careful sips and let out a small sigh of relief. "You were very close to freezing out there," Caleb said, sitting on the edge of the chair again. "If the storm hadn't made me go outside to check the fence line, I might not have seen you." She looked at him with a deep, quiet expression. "I'm grateful," she said softly. "I really thought I might not survive." Caleb didn't say anything for a moment. There was something powerful about hearing someone speak so honestly about their fear. It made him realize even more how dangerous the night had been. After a few minutes, he asked gently, "If you feel strong enough now, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up walking alone in a storm like that?" Nayeli took a slow breath. She rested the cup on her lap and looked down at her hands, as if preparing herself to speak. Caleb waited patiently. He could sense that her story was not simple, and she needed time to gather her thoughts. "My truck broke down," she finally said. 2 days ago. It was already late afternoon when it happened. I was far from any houses, and the road was empty. I waited for hours, but no one passed by." She paused, her eyes clouding with the memory. "I thought maybe I could find help if I walked. I didn't expect the cold to hit so fast. I didn't expect the storm. It caught me by surprise." Caleb nodded. "That area can be dangerous in winter. The wind there can change direction quickly." "Yes," she agreed. And once the storm started, everything looked the same. The land, the hills, the ground. It all disappeared under the snow. I tried to keep walking, but I lost the sense of direction. I walked until I couldn't feel my feet anymore." Her voice grew quieter, as if she could still feel the cold. Caleb leaned forward slightly. "You're safe now. You don't need to worry about the storm anymore." Nayeli gave a small nod, then took another sip of tea. After resting a little longer, she looked up at Caleb with a thoughtful expression. "I wasn't just traveling for myself," she said. "I was on a journey. Something important." Caleb waited, sensing that this part of her story carried emotional weight. "My grandmother passed away 3 months ago," she said gently. "Her last wish was that I visit a sacred Apache place that our family has ties to. It's far from the reservation, and it's not easy to reach. She wanted me to carry a small piece of her memory there. A token she kept all her life." She paused for a moment, holding back the emotion in her voice. "It was important to her. And to me. She always told me stories about that place when I was a child. It was where her parents used to go for prayers. She said it was a place of peace." Caleb listened quietly. He had lost his own father years ago, and he understood what it meant to hold on to someone's last wish. "Where were you heading before the storm hit?" he asked. "To the high ridges south of here," she replied. "There's a narrow path that leads to the old site. I thought I could reach it by sunset 2 days ago, but things didn't go as planned." Caleb sighed softly. "That's a tough route. Even in good weather, people can get lost out there." She nodded. "I didn't expect my truck to break down. And after that, I didn't expect the cold to come so fast. I thought I could walk to the next road, but I misjudged everything." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the gentle crackling of the fire. Nayeli took another breath, then added, "I kept walking, hoping I would see a house or a barn or something. When I finally saw the fence, I thought maybe there would be people nearby. But by then, everything was spinning." Caleb felt a heaviness in his chest as he imagined her alone in the dark storm, walking through freezing wind with no sense of direction. He felt grateful he had gone outside when he did. He stood up and checked outside the window. Snow still covered the land completely, and the sky showed no signs of clearing. "It looks like the storm won't end today," he said. "You should rest here another day. There's no way to travel safely in this weather." Nayeli didn't argue. She looked exhausted, and the thought of stepping back into the cold clearly frightened her. I don't want to trouble you, she said softly. It's no trouble, Caleb replied gently. I've got plenty of space here, and I'm not going anywhere until the storm clears. She smiled faintly for the first time since he found her. It was small, but sincere. Caleb prepared a simple breakfast, warm porridge and toast. Nayeli ate slowly but with appreciation. Afterward, she rested again, while Caleb checked the generator, the animals, and the supplies. The storm made everything quiet outside. Almost too quiet. But inside the ranch house, the atmosphere had warmth that hadn't been there in months. Later in the day, when Nayeli had regained more strength, she sat near the window, looking at the endless snow. This land is beautiful, she said softly. Different from the reservation, but still beautiful in its own way. Caleb looked at her, surprised by her calm observation. Most people only complained about the cold or the isolation, but she noticed beauty, even in the harshness. It's quiet, he said. Some people like it, some don't, she nodded. Quiet can be a friend. It gives the heart space to breathe. Her words struck him gently. He had lived alone for so long that silence had become normal, sometimes comforting, sometimes heavy. But hearing her say it made him see it in a different way. Over the next few hours, they talked more. Nayeli shared small pieces of her life growing up on the reservation, helping her grandmother with traditional crafts, attending tribal ceremonies, and learning the stories passed down through generations. She spoke slowly, with respect, choosing her words carefully. Caleb listened with genuine interest. He had grown up hearing stories only of ranch life, cattle, weather, and land work. Her stories were different, full of meaning, symbolism, and a sense of connection to ancestors. In return, she asked him about the ranch, how long he had lived here, how he managed everything alone, and what life was like before the solitude. Caleb wasn't a man who talked much about himself, but he found himself opening up. He told her about his father's love for the land, the challenges he faced after taking over the ranch, and how the quiet nights sometimes felt heavier than he liked to admit. Nayeli listened the same way he had listened to her, with calm patience. During a quiet moment, she said softly, "You helped me when I was helpless. I won't forget that. My grandmother always said that a person's true nature shows in moments like these." Caleb looked down modestly. Anyone would have helped. "No," she said gently. "Not everyone stops. Not everyone cares enough to look twice at a person lying in the snow." Her words carried warmth, and Caleb felt something shift inside him again, not something dramatic, but something sincere. By evening, the storm outside grew stronger once more, reminding them that the world beyond the walls was still dangerous. But the atmosphere inside the ranch house was different now, calmer, more connected, and filled with a quiet trust that had formed naturally between two people who had started the day as strangers. And as snow continued to fall across the land, Caleb realized that Nayeli's arrival was not just an accident caused by a storm. It was the beginning of something meaningful. Something neither of them fully understood yet. The storm lasted longer than anyone expected. By the time the second day arrived, the world outside the ranch house looked like a thick white blanket stretching across the land. The snow was piled high against the fence posts, the trees were heavy with frozen branches, and the road had completely disappeared under layers of ice and snow. For most people, being trapped like this would feel frightening. But inside the ranch house, the atmosphere carried a sense of quiet safety. Nayeli woke up feeling stronger than the day before. Her hands were no longer numb, and her face had regained a gentle color. Caleb had already been awake for hours, feeding the animals and making sure the generator was still running. When he returned, she was sitting near the fireplace, warming her hands and looking thoughtful. "You look better today," he said as he removed his snow-covered coat. She smiled softly. "Thanks to your help." He placed a steaming bowl of soup on the table. "Eat something warm. Your body still needs more strength." Nayeli nodded and walked slowly to the table. She ate quietly at first, but as she regained more energy, she began to talk. "I've been thinking," she said. "If the storm hadn't forced me to stop, I might have kept pushing myself too hard. Maybe this happened for a reason." Caleb raised an eyebrow. What kind of reason? A pause, she replied. My grandmother used to say that sometimes the land slows us down to protect us from ourselves. Caleb considered that for a moment. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was, Nayeli said with a warm voice. She taught me to listen to the world around me. Not just with my ears, but with my heart. Caleb smiled quietly. He wasn't used to hearing words like that. His world had been built on practical actions, routines, and responsibilities. But something about Nayeli's way of speaking made him think differently. After breakfast, they decided to step outside for a short walk. The storm had weakened enough for them to move around safely on the ranch. Though the cold air stung their faces, Caleb handed her an extra coat and a pair of thick gloves. You sure you're strong enough? He asked. She nodded. Fresh air will help. They walked slowly around the barn. The snow crunched under their boots, and a peaceful silence filled the open land. Everything looked untouched, like nature had pressed the reset button. Nayeli looked around with amazement. It feels like the world is new. Caleb chuckled. It's been a long time since I heard someone describe the ranch like that. Maybe everyone sees beauty differently, she said softly. When I look at this place, I see calmness. A kind of quiet that feels honest. He stopped walking for a moment. Her words struck him again with a gentle weight. Life on the ranch could feel lonely sometimes. But hearing her say it was beautiful made him view it from another angle. They continued walking until they reached the edge of the horse enclosure. The horses stood close together, making small clouds of breath in the cold air. One of them, a chestnut mare, stepped forward and sniffed Nayeli's hand. She likes you, Caleb said. Nayeli smiled and gently stroked the mare's neck. Animals understand energy, she said. They can sense who means peace. Caleb watched her quietly. Something about the way she interacted with the horse, calm, gentle, respectful, made him see her differently. She wasn't just recovering from the storm, she carried a kind of inner strength. When they walked back to the house, the sun peeked through the clouds for the first time in days, creating a soft glow across the snowy landscape. Inside, the warmth welcomed them once again. Caleb prepared more firewood, and Nayeli offered to help. Though she was still gaining her strength, she wanted to be useful. You should rest, Caleb said. I rested enough yesterday, she replied. Let me help. Even small things matter. Together, they arranged the firewood in the corner of the room. Their movements were simple, but the quiet cooperation created a gentle bond between them. They were strangers only 2 days ago. Yet something about their time together felt natural, almost familiar. As afternoon arrived, the storm regained a little strength. Snowflakes drifted across the windows once more. Nayeli sat near the fire, telling Caleb stories about her grandmother's teachings, lessons about gratitude, respect for the land, and the importance of remembering one's roots. Caleb listened, fascinated. He had never been exposed to such stories before. His father had taught him ranch skills, survival skills, and practical values, but he had always missed deeper conversations about meaning and purpose. Nayeli's stories filled that empty space in a quiet, comforting way. At one point she said, My grandmother always believed that people cross paths for a reason. Sometimes to teach a lesson, sometimes to share strength, sometimes just to remind us we're not alone. Caleb didn't usually share personal thoughts, but he felt safe speaking to her. My father used to say something similar, he said. He believed the land sends us the people we need at the right moment, even if we don't understand it at first. Nayeli looked at him with gentle eyes. Maybe this moment is one of those times. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared into the fire, thinking deeply. Since his father passed away, he had spent years in silence, handling everything alone. He had forgotten what it felt like to share an afternoon with someone who listened with real attention. In the evening, they cooked together simple food, but the act of preparing it side by side felt unexpectedly warm. After dinner, they sat near the fireplace again. The snow continued falling outside, yet the ranch house felt bright and peaceful. "Do you miss having people around?" Nayeli asked softly after a long, quiet moment. Caleb hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. I got used to being alone, but there are days when the quiet feels too heavy." She nodded. "Silence can be comforting, but too much of it can make the heart tired." He looked at her and saw understanding in her eyes, real understanding, not just polite sympathy. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you feel lonely on the reservation?" "Not lonely," she replied, "but I do carry responsibilities. Family duties, community work. Sometimes I forget to take time for myself. This journey was important for my grandmother, but I think it was also meant to give me a pause." Caleb rested his arms on his knees. "I'm glad you're safe now, and I'm grateful you found me," she replied. They shared a quiet moment, the kind that didn't need words. The bond that had formed between them wasn't forced or sudden. It grew naturally, like a slow sunrise after a long night. As the night deepened, the fire warmed the room, and their conversation grew softer. They talked about childhood memories, dreams they once had, and fears they rarely spoke about. Caleb told her he always feared failing his father's legacy. Nayeli told him she sometimes feared she wouldn't be strong enough to carry on her grandmother's teachings. By sharing these vulnerable pieces of themselves, they created a quiet connection that felt honest and pure. Before going to sleep, Nayeli looked toward the window. "When the storm ends, I will continue my journey," she said gently, "but I will always remember this place." Caleb nodded, though a small part of him felt something close to reluctance. He knew she had to continue her mission, but he also knew that her presence had brought something into his life, something he hadn't realized he was missing. "You'll get there safely," he said, "and I'll help you." She smiled warmly. "Thank you, Caleb." As she rested that night, Caleb remained awake for a while, thinking about everything that had happened in such a short time. He realized that in helping her survive the storm, something inside him had also awakened, something gentle, hopeful, and alive. He didn't know what the next days would bring, but he did know one thing. Their lives would not return to the way they were before the storm. Something had changed between them, and that change felt quiet, safe, and meaningful. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet ranch, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Ethan stepped outside and took a deep breath of the cool morning air. For the first time in many weeks, the ranch felt peaceful. He looked around and saw the animals moving calmly, the wind passing gently through the grass, and the distant hills glowing under the early light. Everything looked calm, but inside him, his thoughts were still mixed. The last few days had changed his life more than he had expected. Inside the house, Nayeli sat near the fire, warming her hands. She was no longer shivering like the night she first arrived, but there was still a quiet sadness in her eyes. Ethan watched her through the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. He could tell she was thinking about her home, her people, and the journey that brought her here. She turned when she heard him enter, giving him a small, tired smile. Ethan returned the smile and sat across from her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked gently. "Yes," she replied softly. "Your home is safe. I feel peace here." He nodded, glad to hear it, but he could sense something more behind her words. "Are you worried about your tribe?" Nayeli lowered her eyes and took a slow breath. "I think about them every day. I don't know if they are safe, but I also think about this place. And about you. I don't know where I belong right now." Her words hit Ethan more deeply than she knew. He wanted to help her find answers, but he also feared what those answers might mean for him. She had brought strength, warmth, and life into his quiet ranch, and the thought of her leaving felt heavier than he expected. But he pushed those feelings aside. Right now, she needed clarity, not confusion. He looked toward the window and said, "Maybe we can find them. It won't be easy, but maybe we can." Nayeli's head lifted suddenly, hope brightening her eyes. "You would do that for me?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "You're not alone anymore." A soft glow warmed her face, but she quickly looked away, hiding the deep emotion that threatened to rise. She wasn't used to such open kindness from anyone outside her tribe. Ethan's words meant more to her than she could express. Later that day, Ethan prepared his horse and packed some supplies. He planned to search the nearby valley, where rumors said a small Apache group had been seen. Nayeli insisted on going with him, saying she knew the land better than he did. Ethan agreed, though he was protective. He didn't want her tired, cold, or in danger again. They rode out together, the wind brushing past their faces. The land stretched wide and open before them, full of quiet secrets. As they moved, Ethan glanced at Nayeli riding beside him. Her posture was strong, her gaze focused. Even in silence, she carried a calm strength that impressed him. Hours passed as they traveled across hills and through narrow paths. At one point, they reached a high ridge that overlooked the valley. Nayeli carefully stood on the edge, scanning the landscape with practiced eyes. Ethan watched her closely, admiring the way she seemed connected to the land around them. "I see something," she whispered, pointing toward a cluster of trees far below. Smoke rose gently between the branches, thin but steady. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "A campfire?" "Yes. It could be my people." A wave of hope washed over her, and Ethan felt it too. Without wasting time, they began their descent into the valley. The closer they came, the more cautious Nayeli became. She knew it could be anyone, her tribe, strangers, or even people who meant harm. Ethan walked beside her, ready for whatever they might face. As they neared the camp, they saw a few figures moving around the fire. Nayeli froze. She recognized the way they stood, their clothing, their movements. Her heart raced. "That's them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's my family." Before Ethan could say anything, she stepped forward. One of the figures turned at the sound of footsteps. Then his eyes widened. It was her younger brother, Loma. His face lit with shock and joy. "Nayeli," he called out, running toward her. She rushed forward as well, and they embraced tightly. Ethan stood back, watching the emotional reunion. When the rest of the tribe heard her voice, they gathered quickly. Some cried, some smiled, and some simply stared in disbelief. Nayeli shared a long embrace with her mother, who had feared the worst. The sight moved Ethan deeply. Nayeli told them how she had been lost in the storm, how she had wandered through the cold, and how Ethan had saved her life. The tribe turned their eyes to Ethan, who suddenly felt shy under their gratitude. One elder stepped forward and nodded to him with deep respect. "You protected her," the elder said. "For that, our hearts are thankful." Ethan simply bowed his head. "Anyone would have done the same," he said quietly. But Nayeli shook her head gently. "Not anyone. You did." The tribe invited Ethan to stay for a meal, and though he felt out of place, he accepted. They shared warm food, stories, and quiet laughter. Nayeli stayed close to him, translating when needed. Even in a new place, Ethan felt strangely at ease beside her. It was as if she bridged two worlds, hers and his, and he was part of both now. As the sun began to dip, Ethan knew he had to return to the ranch before nightfall. Nayeli walked with him a little distance away from the camp. The air between them felt heavy, filled with things they both wanted to say but didn't know how. "So, this is goodbye," Ethan said softly. Nayeli looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude but also sadness. "My heart is with my family," she said, "but a part of my heart stays with you too." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't want her to leave, but he knew he couldn't hold her back. She belonged with her people. She had found them because he helped her, and that was enough. "You'll be safe now," he said gently. "That's all I wanted." She reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm and sincere. "Ethan, I will come back. Not today, but someday. You helped me live. I won't forget that." His breath caught for a moment. "I'll be here," he whispered. She smiled softly, then let his hand go. He watched her walk back toward her tribe, each step a reminder of how much had changed since the night she first whispered, I'm freezing. I need to get warm. Ethan mounted his horse and began the long ride back to the ranch. The wind was cold, but for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He had helped someone who needed him, and in doing so, he had found a missing part of himself too. Back at the ranch, the sunset painted the sky in warm colors. Ethan looked out across the land and felt a quiet peace settle in his heart. He didn't know when she would return, but he knew the bond they shared was real, built on trust, kindness, and survival. And somewhere in the valley, Nayeli looked toward the distant ranch, thinking of the man who had saved her life and warmed her frozen heart when she had nowhere else to go. Their paths had crossed by chance, but the connection they formed would stay with both of them forever.